I got my Star Wars shirt on, and I'm ready to go. Let's get into it. Hello folks, and welcome back to another video. So today, guys, I am going to finally be ranking all 9 of the Star Wars films in the Skywalker Saga. That, of course, includes all the way from Episode 1 through Episode 9. I'm very excited to get into this. It took me a while to write all these notes because I have a lot to say about each of these movies. So needless to say, I'm very excited for this video. I hope you guys are. I hope you enjoy. And let's get right into it. Alright guys, so coming in at last place for me as my least favorite Star Wars film in the saga is going to be Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. So, I didn't hate this movie. In fact, I didn't hate any of the movies in the saga. However, I recognize that this was definitely the one that I got the least enjoyment out of. There are a lot of issues with this film, a lot of things that they did that I felt could have been done differently. I felt like the story could have been told a lot differently, and I feel like it would have been a lot more enjoyable as a result. So the first point I want to bring up is kind of what George Lucas was going for. And what he was going for, I feel like, is very different than what we as Star Wars fans wanted to see. In the grand scheme of things, I think what we really wanted to see as Star Wars fans, and again, I'll speak for myself. I'm sure there's people out there that really enjoyed this film. And if you did, that's great. But I feel like for the majority of Star Wars fans, we didn't get what we wanted out of this movie. For me personally, I would have liked to have seen the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan develop a lot more than it did. Especially after Episode 1, when we learn that Obi-Wan is going to be playing this teacher role for Anakin. Anakin is going to be playing this apprentice role under Obi-Wan Kenobi. So naturally in Episode 2, we expect to see this relationship develop between Obi-Wan and Anakin. But that's not what we get. Now, at the beginning of the movie, we're kind of tricked into believing that's what we're going to get because we see them together at the beginning. They're doing this like space shuttle racing and all of this crazy things. We get to see some banter between them. And it's like cute banter, it's like, oh, these guys are kind of buddies and so we think at the beginning of this movie that that's what, is in store. But then this movie totally subverts our expectations, and these two characters, they split off and they do their own thing. Obi-Wan is like out there trying to figure out this mystery, and then he finds out there's this clone army, and then Anakin goes off with Padme. He acts as her like bodyguard or protector. And he goes off with Padme, and we see Anakin with Padme for most of this movie, and we are forced to watch this romance develop between them. And when I say we're forced to watch this romance develop between them, I'm referring to the fact that it just doesn't work. Now, you may have liked the direction that they went with this romance. In fact, when I was first watching this movie, I didn't really mind it. Like I didn't see many problems with it. But as I've watched some other YouTubers that I follow talk about this chemistry that they tried to create and this romance that they tried to create between Padme and Anakin, I can kind of see where they were going with it. So I think overall, this is my biggest criticism with the movie. We expected one thing, and we got something completely different. We expected to see this relationship develop between Obi-Wan and Anakin, but instead we got to see this relationship develop between Anakin and Padme, and I don't think that's what most people were wanting out of this film. The second thing I want to bring up, first of all, this movie is called Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. But we don't get to see the Attack of the Clones. It's just teased to us at the end. We get to see everything build up to that, but we don't actually get to see the Attack of the Clones happen. So, again, this movie's tricking us. It's making us think that we're going to get one thing, but we get something completely different. There were things that could have been shortened. There were plot lines that could have been shortened. and there were plot lines that could have been dealt with earlier and could have been established earlier, such as the attack of the clones that we didn't actually get to see really until episode 3. And really, we didn't get to see much of that either in episode 3. Episode 3 was more dedicated to Anakin turning into and transitioning into Darth Vader. That's what that movie was really about. It wasn't about the attack of the clones. This movie wasn't really about the attack of the clones either. So really, the attack of the clones is never really addressed. Like, we don't spend a lot of time with it. And it's just kind of weird, especially when you listen to the characters in the original trilogy talk about, whoa, so-and-so fought in the Clone Wars? You know, like for example, in the original Star Wars, Luke is talking to Obi-Wan when he kind of meets him for the first time. And he's talking to Obi-Wan and he says, what, my father fought in the Clone Wars? And Obi-Wan's like, yeah, your father fought in the Clone Wars. Well, they make these Clone Wars out to be such a big deal, but in the prequels, they're not a big deal. So it's just really weird how they address that. Now, in terms of things that I did like, because I did like some things about this movie. First of all, I liked the scene where the Jedi all come together and they're battling those droids with their lightsabers. My favorite part of this movie by far is that we actually got to see Yoda battle for the first time. Like, we actually got to see Yoda bouncing around and swinging a lightsaber. I like that a lot. So that was personally my favorite part of this movie. All right, guys, so now moving on to my number 8 spot. Coming in at number 8 for me is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So for me, one of the biggest issues with this movie is I actually think it tells a good story. However, it has a lot of pacing issues. So for me, the pacing issues all have to kind of do with how at the beginning of the movie we get a lot of action. Like, we get some fast-paced action at the beginning of this movie. We get to see Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan together, and they're battling, and we get to see them kind of on this mission together. And then all of a sudden, we get introduced to Jar Jar Binks, who I will talk about later. And we are introduced to this underwater scene where they go underwater and they meet the Gun-Guns for the first time, and they're talking to the Gun-Guns, and everything just kind of slows down. You know, it slows down. And a lot of people have problems with this underwater scene with the Gun-Guns. Again, when I was first watching this movie, I didn't mind it. However, one thing I have to keep in mind is I didn't grow up with Star Wars. So these movies, these prequels, are so different from the original movies. So I can see people who grew up with the original trilogy having a serious issue with a lot of what's in the prequels. And then we get to see them escape, right? And they're trying to kind of get away from these monsters, these underwater monsters. All the while you have Jar Jar Binks just being annoying. Again, a lot of people have a hard time or have a problem with Jar Jar Binks. I'll address him later. And then things really slow down when we get introduced to Anakin, young Anakin, and his mother. And we get introduced to kind of his way of life. And it's very easy to get kind of bored with this part of the movie. Pacing-wise, this movie can feel very long at times because there are certain parts where it comes to a huge yield. It's not until the pod racing scene that we actually get a sequence that is a little bit more fast-paced and a little bit more exciting. I feel like this is where you really noticed the special effects being taken up a notch a little bit from the original films. Now, don't get me wrong, the original trilogies still have some great special effects that live up, that still like hold up today. But clearly with this pod racing scene, you could see that, we've taken things up a notch when it comes to special effects. And I thought they did a very good job with that. Pod racing scene was definitely one of my favorite parts of this movie. Now I need to talk about Jar Jar Binks here, because for a lot of people, this is their least favorite part of the movie. Jar Jar Binks, for a lot of people, is a very annoying character. And he's not supposed to be a character that you really like, I don't think. But I feel like my issue with Jar Jar Binks, for the most part, is that he is very cartoony in his personality. Like And again, when I watched this for the first time, I didn't really have a problem with it. But now looking back on it, some of the cartoonish jokes that were made with him and the way that his character was handled, I thought was extremely childish. Like, I think Lucas completely lost sight of the fact that you do realize that adults are watching this movie. Like, people who grew up with, the people who were children during the original trilogy are now adults. And they're being forced to watch Jar Jar Binks act the way he is. And it's just, I don't know. Was it because they were trying to sell toys? I mean, that could be it. Like, they were trying to appeal to a younger generation so that they could sell toys. I don't know. Was it a profit thing? I have no idea. Maybe that's the case. But wow, like Jar Jar Binks is just. I don't mind him. I don't hate Jar Jar Binks, but I don't think they handled him very well. Okay, so now I want to address one of my other big issues with this movie, other than the pacing, and this actually is my biggest issue with the movie. And again, this goes into what I was saying about Attack of the Clones. Because of the way Lucas chose to tell this story, the fact that he chose to make Anakin so young in The Phantom Menace, and Padme was obviously, quite a bit older than him, you couldn't do anything romantically with these two. Clearly he was kind of crushing on her, but obviously you couldn't develop any kind of romantic chemistry due to their ages. And again, it all connects. The fact that Lucas chose to make Anakin so young in this movie was the reason that he had to spend an entire movie developing romantic chemistry in Attack of the Clones. When he could have just made Anakin older, started developing their romantic chemistry in the first movie, and then told the story of the Attack of the Clones in the second movie. Like, actually told the story of the Clone Wars, I should say, in the second movie. So right off the bat, Lucas was just setting this story behind. And then this is where I go back to the fact that I feel like Lucas just wanted so badly to tell his own story. He wanted a movie that focused on Anakin when he was really young and focused around the idea of him being the chosen one. When it's like, did we really need to see Anakin when he was a child? Like, again, I didn't mind it. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed seeing kind of where he was living and the kind of life he was living as a child, but did we need that? I don't think we needed that. In terms of things that I enjoyed about this movie, I already brought up the pod racing, but the lightsaber battle between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Darth Maul in the third act is really cool. Really cool. I that's by far the best part of the movie is that right there. That and the pod racing scene I really enjoyed a lot. And I thought the performances were good. Like, I thought everybody did good. I thought the kid who played Anakin was great. And then freaking Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, the acting is one of the strong parts of The Phantom Menace for sure. All right, now moving on to my number 7 spot. Coming in at number 7 is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. So, let's just first start out about what I liked about this movie. Finally, we get to see the transformation from Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader. That is what we've been wanting to see with these prequels, and we finally got it in the third movie. So, needless to say, I was very excited to watch this movie. I actually bought it, and I was very excited to watch it. And for the most part, it was worth it, I think. I did enjoy this movie. So yeah, the fact that we finally got to see Anakin turn into Vader was great. However, one of the biggest problems with this movie is how sudden Anakin went from being Anakin to being Vader. Throughout the movie, we see this increasing agitation in Anakin. You know, he's becoming more and more frustrated because he doesn't get to be a Jedi Master. And it's like, okay, I can go with that. But he goes right from just being frustrated and angsty because he doesn't get to be a Jedi Master to killing children and becoming Darth Vader. a complete sudden shift. And that was one of my biggest problems with this movie. Now, when you're watching it, you don't notice it as much. It isn't until you reflect on some of these movies that you realize the flaws. And that was the big thing for me. Like, honestly, I enjoyed when I've just watched the prequels, if I didn't even think about them and I just watched them and I went based off that, I really enjoyed them. But the moment that I started to reflect on some of the flaws, I was like, yeah, that was weird. The fact that he just had that just complete 180 shift. Really strange. But again, some of the great things about this movie was the third act, Obi-Wan and Anakin lightsaber battle. And it was really cool. Again, it was kind of the prequels version of Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. In this case, it was Anakin / Darth Vader versus Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it was like the grand finale of lightsaber battles for the prequels. So it was really cool, and it was really fun to watch, and I thought it was well choreographed. However, even this lightsaber battle had its problems. First of all, it went on way too long. If you've already seen this film, then I challenge you to YouTube it, find the lightsaber battle, rewatch it, just the lightsaber battle itself, and then make a decision about whether you feel like it went on too long or not. Because it gets to a point where it's been going on for a very long time, and it gets so outlandish. Like they're floating. I can't remember exactly, but they're like floating on like lava rocks or something, and it gets so ridiculous and over the top, and it's like, okay, you're kind of losing me a little bit. Like, for a while, I was completely immersed into this lightsaber battle. And then it's like, is it over yet? It gets really ridiculous. And then you can't talk about Revenge of the Sith without talking about the no that we get at the end with Darth Vader. Because he finds out that Padme is dead. Yeah, that was unnecessary. I don't know what Lucas was going for with that. Did we need that? Did we need a no at the end of the... No, we didn't need that. No, we didn't need that. Also, I feel like a great stopping point for this movie could have been when the helmet was put on Darth Vader. When we got to see the helmet put on him. I felt like that could have been a great ending. Like, they could have just ended the movie right there. But no, they had to set up the original trilogy. They had to show Anakin going to where he's going. They had to show Leia going to where she's going. And they had to set up the original trilogy. And it's like, we don't need that. Unless you're someone who's going to watch the Star Wars movies starting in Episode 1 and then on. Okay, yeah, that's nice to set things up for them. But most people didn't watch it that way. Most people started with the original trilogy and then went to the prequels and then went to the sequels. They actually watched them in like order of release. That's how I chose to do it, because I read that was the best way to do it. Like, watch them in order of release, because then you really get the, like, okay, this is how people who grew up with it experienced it. They watched the original trilogy, then the prequels, then the sequels. Did we need that? Because if you've watched the original trilogy, you already know sorry, Luke, I said Anakin, but I meant Luke. Luke goes here, Leia goes here. We already know that. So we didn't need the setup. I love the scene where Yoda and Palpatine go at it, and we just get to... Yoda's just so cool. He's just a great character. And the Anakin-Palpatine dynamic in this movie, I thought is actually handled very well. I thought George Lucas did a very great job with, Palpatine convincing Anakin to go to the dark side, and just kind of seeing these guys behind the scenes, behind the backs of the Jedi, kind of talk and converse, and slowly seeing Palpatine kind of turn him over to the dark side. I thought that was actually handled very well. And I thought the fall of Anakin when Obi-Wan beats him is done really well. I really thought that was done well. I thought it was very emotionally effective and very great. So other than the elongated lightsaber battle, I thought that was done well. And then Padme dying from a broken heart. Yeah, that was... a cop-out. I think that was a little bit of a cop-out, but whatever. Yeah, it's like, it's one of those things where you think about it and you're like, really, George, you didn't have a better idea than that? But again, it didn't bother me. When I watched it for the first time, it didn't bother me. It really didn't. I went with it. I went with the flow. I mean, it's freaking Star Wars. People are using lightsabers and using the Force. It's like, she died from a broken heart. Whatever. It's fine. I mean, really, in the movie, they just say she couldn't go on living. It's not like she used the Force and died that way. She died because she couldn't go on living. So really, she died from a broken heart. It's like, okay, I'll run with it, whatever.